And welcome back to another episode of the Illinicast. That's right. We have three for you this week, and that's because the Nebraska Cornhuskers come into town, and we know everyone loves their Nebraska Cornhuskers content. Today, I bring Justin Adams. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the fact that we saw this through and got it going. So,
Yeah, no problem.
yeah.
No problem. Justin's had to deal with some issues on my end working this whole
You
setup with
too.
going.
You've been fighting to get it going. So, I mean, hey, you saw it through. You wanted to get it out for the people. So let's do it.
Justin and I recorded a show earlier this week with the voice of college football, Mark Rogers. Justin, why don't you just tell the crowd where you're from?
Yeah. So, my name is Justin Adams. I work over, like he said, at the Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football, a YouTube channel over Mark Rogers TV. Um, I also am the co-host of Cheesy Corn Sports on YouTube. I know I'm talking to a Bears guy here. So me and my buddy, he's a Packers fan. I was a Cornhusker fan.
Mute.
We basically, yeah, right. We basically, bought a couple mics last year. We were arguing about sports all the time at work. People thought we should start a podcast, so bought some equipment, started arguing online about it, and here we are. Got picked up by the Husker channel, and loving what I'm doing right now. It's a blast. So, and I'm happy to be on. Happy to be joining other Big Ten schools and trying to give some breakdowns for y'all.
I mean, I really enjoyed your work, and that's why after we did our show earlier in the week, I reached out to you almost immediately to
Yeah.
see if you had any availability. So I'm really excited to have you on, and so let's just I want to get that bad taste of the Packers out of my mouth. Let's talk about this big Illinois Nebraska game coming up Friday night.
Let's do it.
Just give me your large overview of the Nebraska football season so far this year.
Yeah. I mean, as I'm sure as everybody's seen, it's kind of been a little bit of an up and down. Coming into the season, my take on everything was, win losses were going to come as they may. The biggest thing that I need to see over this team, from watching this team over the last 5 years, is to see some kind of fight, some kind of resilience that we haven't seen from this team, and just see some of those self-inflicted errors start to increase or decrease. I was kind of the mantra, walk before we can run, right? We got to start fixing a lot of these things that lead to wins before we can start winning. So coming out of the gates against Minnesota, yes, that loss hurt. However, we turned the ball over 3 times, to their one, blew the game at the end. For all intents and purposes, the fact that we were in that game was a good sign. The whole Colorado thing came, Nebraska turned the ball over left and right in that game. Basically, what happened was playing at altitude, our defense couldn't get off the field. It was 13-6 till 4 minutes left in the third quarter, and then the game was put away because our defense basically was gassed after that. 4 turnovers, that's going to happen. Then we get over to Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech. Harburg takes over as a starter, and we start to see some grit, some battle from this team, albeit against lesser competition, but still lesser competition hasn't been easy for us in the most recent years either. So then the Michigan game comes. I was out at that one, and it was a bloodbath. I will say that. Although I kept my expectations low, I said to even have a chance to win that game, we would have to play absolutely perfect, and even then, it would be very, very difficult for us to win that game. So, I'm not too worried about the manner in which we lost. More so, it's just basically what this team is right now is it's a team that doesn't have insanely good talent, as we know. The team is much more disciplined as far as tackling goes. Playing their 1 through 11, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Everybody's doing a good job of doing their job. And that's the one thing I've noticed the biggest improvement on is just a lot of discipline in terms of that. But the biggest lacking right now, the biggest lacking things right now is, our starting quarterback coming into the year, Jeff Sims, could not get out of his own way with the turnovers. Then he got an ankle injury. So Harburg started the last 3 weeks. Now we're in a little bit of position where Harburg had a struggling game out there against Michigan. So we still have a question, when Sims is healthy, is he going to come back and is he going to be the guy? Is Harburg going to see it out? So right now it's just the team is if we can stay out of our own way, then we can string some wins together. But it's not one of those seasons where I'm going to be confident predicting 6, 7 wins or predicting any wins on the schedule for that matter, just because until we can consistently prove that we can turn the ball over or not turn the ball over and force turnovers, then that's when I'll get some more confidence. The problem being right now is, our defense has had a few takeaways, but we haven't gotten multiple per game. So right now we're just leaning heavy on our defense, leaning heavy on our run game, and trying to just keep the game shortened so that way we can limit our mistakes. And so that's going to be a big key for this one especially.
It's funny, like, had you asked me the same question, I could have pretty much given the same response verbatim.
We're in very
We're just,
similar spots, yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
the problem is, you guys are in year one of a new regime and we're in year three, so
Yes.
we should be a lot further along than where we are, but I think there's reasons for that. So you brought up the quarterback situation and
Mhm.
how right now there's kind of a crossroads. Where, if you were Matt Rhule, which way would you go?
Me personally, you know, with Matt Rhule coming into the season, he had, Anthony Grant was our starting, our top running back last year, and was going supposed to be the starter coming into the season. Well, Anthony Grant ended up having some fumbling issues in fall camp, so he came into the season third on the depth chart. Um, and then he actually got some playing time, and then fumbled again. He fumbled one time on the season, didn't see the field, and then came back out 2 weeks ago, kind of got some reps. But then after that game, the rest of our running back room got hurt. So Gabe Irvin, who was our RB1, and Ramir Johnson, who was right there as an or with Anthony Grant on the depth chart. Ramir Johnson being the kind of receiving back, and then Gabe Irvin being kind of the do-it-all back, and Anthony Grant being the big physical back. So now we're down to just Anthony Grant. But the thing is, the reason I bring that up is because Anthony Grant was benched for one fumble, and then Sims came out and had 8 turnovers, I think, in the first 2 weeks, 7 turnovers. So, and then he had an ankle injury. Ankle injuries are not easy to come back from. I told everybody that week that he probably wasn't going to be playing for a couple weeks because ankle sprains are no joke to come back from. So now we're in a position where, okay, you had 2 good games under Harburg. Harburg really didn't, he protected the ball. Um, he made sure that we kept the ball moving. He's a playmaker. He's a football player. His ceiling isn't very high, but he's going to go out there. He's a Nebraska kid. He's from Nebraska, was a Nebraska fan growing up. Now he's a starting quarterback, been at the university for a few years, back on the depth chart. So I don't think his ceiling is quite as high, but to me, he's been the guy who's been the most disciplined and has played the hardest and has gotten us in the best position to win. With Sims, still, if he's not 100% off that ankle injury, and then still, we haven't seen him come out and not be able to turn the ball over. So I still feel most confident in Heinrich Harburg, being that he has some of that rapport with the offense that Sims doesn't necessarily have right now. Sims hasn't played since week 2. And even when Sims did have to pop out there for a snap, he looked hobbled on that ankle, even just limping, just walking out there and walking off the field. So if I was Rule, I'd probably go Harburg. However, with the way Rule talks about Sims, I would not be surprised if when Sims is healthy, if he runs him as the guy out there, just because, you know, I haven't given up on Sims by any stretch. I think turnovers are one of the easiest things to fix, especially these snap fumbles, right?
Yeah.
Interceptions are another thing, that comes down to a whole myriad of issues, mechanics, and all that. But when it comes down to just like dropping the snaps, I felt like he had a case of the yips in a way. So, I do think that the ceiling is higher for Sims, but I think the floor is lower. And I think right now Harburg just gives us the best chance to win. So it comes down to whether Rule wants to continue to develop Sims for this season and the next, or if he wants to go with the guy who gives us the best chance to win this season, which in the past at Baylor and Temple, Rule really hasn't worried about wins in year one. It's more about his process, implementing his culture and getting his guys in there.
Does the style of offense change with one quarterback in as opposed to the other, or this is still kind of similar?
It's very similar, and it's interesting you bring that up because we really haven't had an offensive identity up until the first 3 weeks. It was like we were figuring it out, and then I'll say in the Northern Illinois game, which was week 3, we came out in that scripted drive and scored. Okay, but the scripted drive's not going to tell us much. What are we going to do? Second, third drives. Okay, we didn't score for the next like 4 drives. We come out and we score right before halftime. And then halftime comes, and then we get our momentum going into the second and then come into the third quarter. And so when we got our momentum going, it was a whole lot of, quarterback run, heavy quarterback run, running back run, and then short intermediate passing games to get the ball out of his hands quick. That way, our offensive line doesn't have to protect too long. Our offensive line doesn't do well in pass blocking. So it was the short intermediate games to set up the run, and it was just trying to pound the rock, pound the rock, pound the rock. It seems like when we try to pass too much, that's when we get away from ourselves. So that's why it's very important for us to get ahead and protect. However, we have not gotten off to an early start yet this season. So that's going to be the key is we still need to get off to an early start and protect, because when we get put into must-pass situations, it's a little bit more uphill sledding. We lost Trey Palmer last year. Trey Palmer to the NFL was all-time Nebraska receiving leader in nearly every category. So that's a huge blow. And right now we don't have a true one receiver. Billy Kemp is our kind of do-it-all guy, but Billy Kemp is our one, but he's small. So we actually need like a one, like X receiver, like a big body. Marcus Washington is supposed to be our one, but it just hasn't clicked with him yet over the last couple of years. He was a transfer out of Texas, came over Casey Thompson. It just hasn't clicked yet with him. So we're still waiting on that one guy to emerge. Right now, it looks like our tight ends, Thomas Finoni and Nate Borkacher, are going to be two of our key big pieces as far as red zone goes and just those big targets that we need out there on the field. But outside of that, Billy Kemp, there's not a whole lot of separation in the receiver room. But
Funny you say that, so basically what you're telling me is the first quarter under is pretty much a lock, because Illinois is just awful in the first quarter too. I think I read a stat that we've been outscored something like 39-10 in the first quarter. And Illinois, the way we're built, is not to come back.
Yeah.
It's built to take an early lead, then wind down the clock, let Luke make the right passes, not to be forced to make passes. And that, has a big reason to why we haven't had the success that we've had so far this season.
Yeah.
Speaking of Luke, what kind of defense is he going to be facing Friday night?
Yeah, so we run the 3-3-5. Tony White came in and implemented the 3-3-5 defense. So it's been, what he's been able to do has been phenomenal. Last season, we could not get pressure on the quarterback to save our life. That put a lot of stress on our defensive backs. This year, it came out of the gates and was a completely different animal. We were at one point first in college football in sacks. We were number one in run defense. Of course, Michigan happened, and that changed a lot. But that is Michigan. But Tony White just schemed this defense up very well to, the stunts he's bringing, the stuff like that. It's causing constant confusion. If you go back and watch Northern Illinois, Rocky Lombardi, the quarterback for Northern Illinois, his head was spinning the whole time. He could not figure out what was going on, and there was a lot of team speed on that defense, and he was under duress the whole time. So our defense is a whole lot of just trying to get pressure on the quarterback, and that way it keeps our defensive backs in a situation where they don't have to sit out there on an island too much, and they could just make plays. They can get out there and they could just react instead of thinking, and that's what's happening a lot more this year as opposed to last year. I think last year our defense looked like there was no whole lot of thinking, not a ton of reacting. This year it seems like everybody knows their job. We move guys around. We have the jack position. We have the rover, which are two kind of like hybrid positions. We'll have Gifford, who will bump down. He will play at the linebacker position. He'll play up at safety, or he'll even come down and he'll get down at the line and he'll rush. So we have guys moving all over the place, and that just makes it really hard to prepare for, because just guys are all over the field. You never know who's going to be on who in each. And I think just the schematically, the way he's drawing things up is causing a lot of confusion, and we do have a lot of talent on defense. Nash Hutmacher, number 0, is a big key. Ty Robinson, number 9 on the end. And then our DBs, Javen Wright, we had Hardzog and all those guys. Like they are just killing it this year. Phelan Sanford had to move in for a replacement on a defensive backfield. So we do have an injury there. But Phelan Sanford, so like I was saying on the previous show, it may be something that Illinois wants to look at and maybe try to target that side wherever they have Phelan Sanford. But again, it's going to be hard to know who he's covering because Tony White has that defense playing, like I said, everywhere. And it's hard to know who's doing what job from play to play. But this defense is just it's physical, and it's just bringing a lot of hats to the ball. Get one man to the ball, stand that ball carrier up, and get a bunch of guys over there. There has been some issues with over pursuits and stuff like that, but what we're doing this year is we're tackling soundly. Up until the Michigan game, we were tackling soundly, and we're just playing gap sound, and that's really been the biggest turnaround in our defenses. I think we're just doing our job, and we're sticking to the fundamentals. We're not trying to do too much.
I think, I'm trying to catch up on a little Nebraska tape for tomorrow night. And I can say right off the bat, from what I've watched, you definitely look more like a Big Ten team as opposed to what the versions of Nebraska have been looking like in the past. Obviously the players for Matt Rhule scheme may not be there yet, but at least the style of play, you guys are, finally being a little bit more physical. I can see that, finally your guys are kind of adapting to what, especially in particular the Big Ten West, the way we play. The styles being, changed around, which is funny because next year the Big Ten West is gone. So
yeah, exactly.
It's all not for nothing. But speaking of Matt Rhule, obviously you guys aren't off to the hottest start this season, and people nowadays are getting more and more impatient. You talked about head coaches being fired in year 2, 3-year contracts. It's how would you gauge the Nebraska fan base and their feelings towards Matt Rhule, and also then yours individually?
Yeah, that's a good question because it's chaos sometimes with Nebraska fans. We are ridiculously loyal to a fault sometimes, but also very emotional as fans. If you ask some of our fans an hour after the game, they'll tell you something different than they'll tell you the Friday before the next game, So, but the problem is right now is a lot of fans are thinking too emotionally about Rhule and not looking at it in the perspective of this. People's patience ran thin because, of course, Nebraska hasn't won since, really since 2001. We were in the national championship game, got our doors blown off by that Miami team, and that was kind of downhill from there. Basically, once we fired Solich, it was downhill from the Solich firing. And what it is like, especially with Frost, 5 years of people being asked to be patient year after year after year because Frost was the hometown kid, he'll get it figured out, guys. Let's have patience. And I think Nebraska fans as a fan base feel burnt out by that. And logically, what we would need to do is when we got Rhule in here, right? We said all off season, the fans and everybody, even the ones that are calling for his head, said it's going to be a process. This isn't going to be a 1-year turnaround. You can't turn around a college football team in 1 year, which is why I was anti-Colorado for the longest time. Like, they have not turned that team around. Just wait until they run into some of these teams. Not saying they won't, but it's just not. It's not something, especially in the Big Ten, that is doable in one season. So Nebraska fans didn't really reset that confidence or that patience meter like they did when Scott Frost was hired. Think back to because I was at Scott Frost's very first win. I flew out there for the Minnesota game. We were 0-6, and we beat Minnesota in that 7th week. And, people weren't calling for Scott Frost's head when we were 0-6, 0-4, 0-5, 0-6. They were just like, give it time, give it time. Well, now Rhule's here, and, week 2, we're 0-2, and people are calling for his head already. And to me, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense because I think with Frost, we expected a quicker turnaround than we did with Rhule because he turned down, his whole mantra was he turned around UCF in 2 years. So we're expecting come turn this baby around. Well, now we got a guy who's, turned programs around over 3 years. And now we're trying to be impatient to him and hold him to a standard of a quick turnaround. And he'll go in his press conferences after week 2. He's like, "This is what you hired me for." He's like, "I told you it was going to be a process. We're not going to come here and turn this thing around overnight." And I don't think fans are stepping back and realizing that the emotions getting the best of them because we want to win now, but that's just not how this works. I want to win too, but like I have to come in here each week and just be like, I feel like I'm trying to talk everybody off a ledge each week. But even the Michigan game, especially, none of us predicted to win that game. So I didn't understand why everybody was coming in after that game calling for his head. It's like this changes nothing. Of course, we wanted to see a little bit more fight, but what in the grand scheme of things, does this change anything? No, it doesn't. We're right back on the wagon. What we need to do is take care of the games ahead of us that we need to take care of, that we're supposed to take care of. 5-6 wins is still on the table because, as those first 2 games didn't go necessarily our way, well, some games later on the schedule looked a little bit easier. Iowa lost their quarterback. You have some teams that aren't playing up to par of what we thought they would coming into the season. So I think everything we need is still ahead of us. I have not changed one bit my confidence in Matt Rhule. If anything, I'm a little bit more confident in him because I love what I'm seeing from this team. Most of the stuff that are fundamental flaws that I saw last year are not flaws this year, and you can tell that it's just they're practicing better. They're practicing more physical. They're more prepared, and there's a lot more fight in this team and the way they interact with the coaches and the sideline. It's different, and I can see that. Again, people are too focused on box scores and wins and losses. So, we'll see. In 2 years, if I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. But again, I have all the confidence in the world in Matt Rhule.
Yeah, I during the offseason, I thought Nebraska made the best hire in the conference. I like Luke Fickle,
I like Fickle too, yeah.
but I just think the system he's trying to bring into Madison is going to be. I'm not saying it can't be done.
Yeah.
But it's going to be pretty tricky.
Yeah,
And
it is.
Matt Rhule, like you can see what's going on in Carolina now. That organization is just, not that I'm one to talk. I'm a Bears fan, but
I'm a
they're
Texas fan.
not.
So,
The little circle of sadness here.
yeah.
He was in a situation where yeah, it didn't work out at the NFL, but what he's done at the NCAA, like he's proven himself twice in some very difficult jobs.
Yeah.
And Nebraska, he's going to have resources that he didn't have at his previous stops.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
And as you mentioned, year one, everywhere Rhule goes, it's just a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
But you do tend to see a quicker turnaround, and he's got the team playing, for championships, just a couple seasons away. So,
Yep.
I think you guys are, in really good shape moving forward. But I guess is really good shape enough for a Nebraska fan. So now, obviously, in 2024, there's 4 new teams that we're adding to the conference.
Mm-hmm.
What's the reasonable mountaintop for Nebraska football?
So I will set the reasonable mountaintop right now. I think I'm just going to be as conservative as possible. Step 1 is competing for the Big Ten West. Now, albeit that's going to go away next season, but kind of in that same mantra is just like those teams, we're still chasing those teams no matter what the conference gets realigned or anything like that. Like our focus doesn't need to go to USC's and all of that. Our focus still needs to be on, okay, we need to be better than, this tier of Big Ten teams. I think Nebraska fans are still setting their sights a little too high right now. We haven't been in a position where we can beat, like Illinois, for instance, like one of the saddest games ever was that opener against Illinois. And I think
2 years ago.
21?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
And I remember after that game was the first game I didn't feel mad. I just felt sad, right? And so
It was Ireland, right? That game was in Ireland.
I'm not. I think it might have been. I know Northwestern's loss was in Ireland. The
Okay, yeah,
Northwestern loss was.
okay.
I think the Illinois one was. I'm not sure. I think that one was states. I can't remember, but that one was painful. And so for me, it's one of those things. It's like we got to walk before we can run. So me trying to be realistic is we need to be able to compete with your Iowas and Wisconsins consistently. We can compete with Iowa every year, but Wisconsin, has had our number for a lot of these years. Illinois, like all of these other teams, we can't consistently beat yet. So I'm not too worried about UCLA, USC. Those guys are going to be there, when we get up there. I really just want to focusing on beating this middling tier, right here. And then we can start talking about, Big Ten champions. When we consistently compete and can beat with your Wisconsins, your Iowas, and, even try to be in a game against some of these bigger opponents. Not until then will I feel confident in saying that Big Ten titles are in the horizon, or just we're going to be on the level of those top teams in the Big Ten. We just got to get past this middle tier first and be able to compete with those before I'll even set the standards high. I do think Nebraska has the facilities, the NIL to be, a top 25 team year in and year out. But we got to see them, we've had the facilities, we've had the money. We need to see that finally translate. And so I do think that that's still on the table for us, but it's little boy who cried wolf trying to say it every year, So we got to just keep it where it is and just I think right now this year 5-6 wins is very much on the table. 7 is I think 7's asking a little much, but 6 would be a great result for the season, and then maybe move 7, 8, 9 next year. But yeah, it's hard to look too far ahead into what the ceiling ultimately can be for this team, because we want to say it's a national title picture again, but I have no reason to say that just yet. But
obviously, Nebraska football has had a lot of success in its past. If you don't mind, let's swing a little curve real quick. Give you a
yep.
curveball. Let's talk about Nebraska basketball.
Oh yeah.
What do you
Even
think
worse.
of Coach Hoiberg?
So Hoiberg, all right.
Former Bulls coach.
He's been good at moments and bad at moments. There's times I feel really good about him. Like last year, there were moments where I felt like, okay, like Purdue. We played Purdue at home. They were number 2 at the time. I can't believe they're number 2. I can't remember if they're number 2 or 1. And we actually should have won that game. However, they called, they were anticipating an intentional foul, and the guy actually turned the ball over, and we had a run to the basket and scored. However, they preemptively called that foul, anticipating that intentional foul that was going to be made, and that ended up losing us the game. Well, the game ended up staying tied, and then it went to overtime, and we lost. So, this year it's going to be, I think, what people aren't really, there's a couple of transfers this year. Now, again, when I say better than the previous season, we're talking, I think at best Nebraska can be an 8th in the Big Ten. I think last is very much a possibility, as always, just because it's hard to have any confidence in Nebraska basketball. So worst Division I program in the country. We've never won a tournament game even. I think we're 0-7 all time. But I do feel like this might be the most reason for excitement. Keisei Tominaga, who is Andy Katz's number 1 shooter in the country. But is he good enough to be all Big Ten? Okay, we'll see. That is yet to be seen. We know he can shoot streaky, but we want to see consistency, and can he, like I said, can he compete for, all Big Ten? We're going to need somebody to come through in that regard and be that guy who separates himself. And then Bryce Williams, we got a transfer from Charlotte, Bryce Williams. He's going to be the wing. He averaged 14 points a game there. I think he shot nearly 40% from 3. And that to me, I think is going to be one of the biggest key pieces of this season. He's a big guy, 6'8", I believe. So there's going to be talent there. There's not enough talent yet to compete with the upper echelon of the Big Ten. When I say talent, we're going to be able to probably I think we'll be able to move up to maybe, like I said, between, 8 is the peak for me. But somewhere in that 8 to 10 range is kind of where I'm pegging us to be. So but we have to see it from Hoiberg this year. He's running out of time because, again, I know our basketball team has not historically been good, but there's still, at Nebraska, there's money that can get you out of there, and there's money that can buy us coaches that can get us excitement. So Hoiberg is going to be in the hot seat until he gives us something that shows that, like, hey, like, get us to an NIT. Like, can we even if we can get to the NIT, I think he 100%, is back on next season. The NIT is a win for us, So
Mhm.
That's kind of the standard. It's hard to judge because the standard is so low for Nebraska basketball, but you know, we're at that point where he needs to start showing like, hey, like this team, I can at least get this team in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten and competing for the NIT. We'll worry about the tournament when we can worry about when we get to the NIT. But yeah, it's I'm excited for this season. Um, you know, I'm excited for every season. I don't know why, but I do this to myself. But yeah, it's gonna be tough sledding. But I do think this year's team is going to be a little bit better than last year. Last year, you know, we had a improvement defensively, but we really just need a lot more physicality this year. Losing Derek Walker is going to be a tough replacement. So depending on how those replacements go and stuff like that is going to really tell the tale. But I do think Hoiberg can coach this team. Like I say, he did a good job with the team last year, and I do think this team is a little bit more complete than last year. So, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Yep.
And you have any final predictions for Illinois, Nebraska in football tomorrow?
Man, I do believe it'll probably be. I think it'll be me personally. I think it'll be a close game up until a team pulls away in the fourth quarter. I do think it'll be a close game until the fourth quarter. I do know one of the things that's going to really hinder us is Tristan Alvano, our field goal kicker. He's a true freshman, was great, like one of the greatest Nebraska high school kickers of all time. He went 5 for 5 and drilled like a 50-something yarder to win the state championship game this past season. He's very young and inexperienced, and up until now, he hasn't been able to hit field goals consistently. So y'all have the leg up there. And in a game where this might actually be a low scoring game and points are going to be hard to come by, that might be the difference. And so I'm hopeful that Nebraska can pull out maybe a 10-point win, but I think it could go 10 points either way. I'm going to say, I'll say 27. We'll do 27-17 Huskers. We'll rock with that.
All right. I have the score 31-13. I just
Mhm.
don't know who has 31 and I don't know who has 13. I
Yeah.
think I kind of subscribe to what you're saying. I think it could be a relatively close game, but
Yeah.
what's happened against Penn State with Illinois and what's happened against Purdue is we keep it reasonably close for, X amount of quarters, and then the air is let out of the balloon and the
Yeah.
opposition scores. I think Purdue outscored us 21-0 in the third quarter. So I'm fearing
Yeah.
that's what might happen again on Friday.
I
But
can
it's going to
tell
be a fun
you
game to watch. It's going to be a sicko game to watch.
I can tell you
Uh,
one thing though. One
mhm.
one of y'all's what I think is going to be the biggest indicator here is of course the turnover battle. The reason why so much in this game is I think if y'all can take care of the ball and not turn the ball over and do our offense favors, that is going to be the recipe to success for y'all. Because right now the turnovers killed us all season. And so if y'all play within yourselves and don't turn the ball over, and like I said, we haven't been able to force multiple turnovers in a single game, that might give y'all the best chance to win. So if y'all can protect and just kind of somewhat, keep it a game, or even take a little bit of a lead, and not let us force a turnover, things could get real interesting there and could go south for us. So that's going to be an important thing to watch. Is just if y'all stay within yourselves and don't beat yourselves, that's going to give y'all the best chance to win because we have consistently beaten ourselves. So
Again, our teams are almost like mirror images at this point. So
it
I
sounds
think
like,
it'll
yeah.
be whoever jumps out to the lead in the beginning. It's going to be interesting to see if they don't fumble it up because it sounds like neither team has been, in front that early in the game, and
And
so it might be a
turnovers are
little,
so hard to predict. So
yeah,
that's why it's
yeah.
so hard to pick this game.
Mm-hmm. All right, Justin, thank you again for coming. Where can my audience find you? Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, so Cheesy Corn Sports on YouTube. Cheesy Corn's one word, and then space sports. And then I'm at the underscore H Town Husker on X, Twitter, whatever they call it now. So I got back on there in like August. So yeah, so I'm at the underscore H Town Husker. And then of course you can for the Nebraska content, if you ever want to pop over there, it's Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football on Mark Rogers TV, or his main channel, Mark Rogers at the Voice of College Football, where he has all the whole college football world on his main channel. So live call-in shows and everything that people can participate in and stuff like that. So got a little something for
Are you
everybody.
doing Are you doing the post game tomorrow for the Nebraska game?
Yes, and I actually might have Chancellor Brewington on. Chancellor played for the team in 2022.
Uh-huh.
And so he might come on and just hop on there, and we'll go into a little bit more in depth, and he can give us a little bit of the football X's and O's perspective from it. And so yeah, so he'll probably be on there. So if he's on there, if y'all want to hop over and just hear, a little bit of his breakdown from what he saw from a player's perspective too, by all means, feel free to hop on. And then, I could even bring you on for a little bit if you decide. We'll discuss that. So, yeah, man. So immediately following the game on Friday, we'll be on there.
Sounds good. I'll drop a link in the description of this video and also tweet it out tomorrow as the game comes to its conclusion. Justin, once again, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
I wish you luck the rest of the week, except for tomorrow.
Yep.
To the rest of the audience, if you can please just like and subscribe, costs you nothing, takes a second, helps little channels like this out a lot. And this is our third episode of the week, so we're going to take some time off. We'll recap the Nebraska game next week. And our plans are also to give a State of the Union for pretty much halfway of the season being done and where we see the Illinois football program. Thanks, Justin.
All right. Thank you for having me, man.
Thanks, guys.